Hello, my name is Barbara Olenyik Morrow, and I'm the author of the children's picture book, Mr. Mosquito Put on His Tuxedo. And we're going to read it and talk about it today. But before I begin, I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I, as a writer, do my work. I live in Auburn, and here's a photo of my home here in Auburn. And on a typical day, early in the day, morning or mid-morning, I go downstairs to my office, which is in the front of the house there with all the windows that you can see. And there I do my reading, my research, and my writing. And as a writer, if I get deep into a project, which is often the case, I don't just knock off my work at a certain hour. Sometimes I will continue to work late into the evening. And you can see here, this is the inside of my office, and it's late at night. You'll also notice in my office there are lots of books, bookshelves filled with books. My desk is filled with books. Because books are the tools of a trade for a writer. I need to read, because by reading I learn things. And by reading, as I learn things, ideas come into my head. Here's the other side of my office. Again, more bookshelves, more books. You'll also see at the front of my office there on the desk is my computer screen, my monitor. That's where I actually type my manuscripts. And after the manuscript is typed, I print it out on the computer, which was right below the monitor. And here is page 1 of Mr. Mosquito Put on His Tuxedo in typewritten form. Now, after I've written a manuscript, I look for an editor who might be interested in publishing it. In this particular case, I sent this manuscript to an editor in New York City, and I was a little bit fortunate because this editor, this publishing house, had a few years earlier published another one of my books, A Good Night for Freedom. So they willingly took a look at this manuscript. They liked it. They offered me a contract, and I knew it was going to become a book. But it's a children's picture book, and I'm not an artist. I can't draw at all, so this book needs illustrations. Now, something that may surprise you, as the writer, I do not reach out to illustrators myself. It's the job of the editor in New York to find the illustrator for this book that they think would be a good match. The editor knows lots of illustrators. She reached out to someone that she thought would be appropriate, and the illustrator was Ponder Gemble, who lives in Pennsylvania. She had a number of books to her credit. And the illustrator brought Ponder's artwork together with my words. During this process, I'm not allowed to call Ponder or reach out to her. Anything that goes on, I work through the editor, as does the illustrator. So in my case, in Auburn, I have to wait and wait and wait to see the pictures. But eventually, I get an idea of what my illustrated manuscript will look like. Because eventually one day in the mail comes this big envelope, and inside are these big pages. And I know you can't see everything here, but essentially what they are the drawings that are going to go with my words. Page after page, I can look at Ponder Gemble's illustrations. But as I said, this is not a book, so I have to keep waiting. And eventually, I receive this in the mail, and now I see the cover to the book. And I open it up, but of course this is still not a book, because if I let go right now, all of this would just fall to the ground, because this is simply called the folded and gathered copy, not a bound book. So I start to get an idea of what it's going to be like, but it's not a book yet. So I have to wait and wait and wait until eventually one day what arrives at my house are some books. And they are my book, Mr. Mosquito Put on His Tuxedo. And I'm able to sit and go page by page and enjoy what I'm seeing. I think the pictures are marvelous. And obviously it's not going to fall apart. It's been bound at this point. But I'm so pleased with the illustrations and how the book has turned out. I decide I need to write Ponder Gemble, the illustrator, a letter. So I do. I write her a thank you note. And I send it to my editor in New York, who forwards it on to her. After some time, Christmas is approaching, and I receive this red envelope in the mail. I open it up, and inside I find a Christmas card. And here it is. And Ponder Gemble that year has taken Mr. Mosquito, and she's put him in a Santa suit. And in all of his arms, legs, he's holding Christmas gifts. And I think it's just delightful. And inside, she wrote me a nice note. And she wrote, "Happy holidays. Hope you have a good holiday season. It was a surprise to get a letter from you. Always nice to be appreciated, especially by authors. I really enjoyed working with your witty words and creating a dapper mosquito character. Keep on writing, Ponder." I love that she sent me this, and I've held on to it for a number of years, and I always shall. So, we're ready now to start getting into the story, and here you see the opening page, the title page, and I would like to call your attention to something before I do start the reading. Here you see what appears to be grass, which indeed it is, and there are two little twigs, and there's a little leaf, and that signifies a door, the door to Mr. Mosquito's house. You see a little black hat there on the door. And what I want to do now is share a word with you, and the word is perspective. It's a big word. But essentially, in this story as it begins, our perspective is going to be small. We're going to have a bug's eye view of the world. We're going to be looking at things as a bug might see them. But as this story progresses, and by the end, the perspective is going to change. And we'll talk about that when we get to the end. And also, in this story, as a writer, I place clues in the manuscript to take us to the end, and Ponder Gemble illustrated my written cues. And so I'm going to encourage you as we go through the book that you look closely at the illustrations, at the pictures, and see if you can pick up on some of the clues that will help explain the surprise at the end. So, having said all that, we're ready now to start reading Mr. Mosquito Put on His Tuxedo. Mr. Mosquito put on his tuxedo. He flew out the door to the ball. He waved to Miss Spider, but couldn't invite her. "So sorry, just insects, that's all." Now, take a minute here, though. You see Mr. Mosquito flying out the door. He's going to the insect ball. But darn it, Miss Spider can't go. Do you know why? Well, spiders and insects are not the same. And there's one distinguishing difference. There's other differences, but one in particular. Spiders have 8 legs. Can you count Miss Spider's 8 legs? Insects have 6. And see if you can count 6 legs and arms on Mr. Mosquito. It's just a difference. But this book and this ball that he's going to, it's strictly for insects. It's the insect ball. So hopefully next time Miss Spider will get to go to a spider ball. Mr. Mosquito arrived a bit tardy. The doormen were Horsefly and Gnat. They shoot him right in. Where on earth have you been? My limousine, drat, had a flat. Oh dear. Mr. Mosquito strolled down a red carpet. He bowed to his host, the queen bee. Your Highness, he said, you are looking well fed. I saw your hive live on TV. Look at the picture of the queen here. I love her beautiful cloak, her crown, the jeweled necklace, and the prince and princess are standing next to her. And do you know what that is in her hand she's holding? Well, we call it a scepter. And a lot of time royalty, they'll carry the scepter, it's like a wand, and she might stretch it out with her hand, and she might tap the head of someone who comes and kneels before her. And then she might make them a knight. She says, I'll dub you my royal knight or something. So it's something that maybe you've seen before in movies. Mr. Mosquito stood chatting politely. A dozen lice loaned him a comb. Your offer's divine, but I do prefer mine. It's from a flea market in Rome. Now, that's a nice comb, but he turns it down, and for a pretty good reason, and that's because lice tend to like to live in combs or in hats, and if you borrow someone else's comb or hat, you might get lice in your hair, and that's not really something you want. So he did something that was very wise, healthy, and that was not to borrow the comb. Mr. Mosquito glanced around for a partner. He waltzed with a wasp, and they twirled. I dare say your stinger is quite a humdinger. Wasp whispered, it's out of this world. Mr. Mosquito rushed up to a cockroach. Dear chap, could you bring me some punch? And a pint would be nice of chilled blood over ice. I've not had a bite since my lunch. Now, why does Mr. Mosquito want to drink chilled blood? Well, we know whose blood he likes to drink. When mosquitoes bite us, they're really drinking our blood. And I want to call your attention back to Mr. Mosquito dancing with the wasp on the dance floor. I love how she's dressed. Beautiful dress. Looks like she's got her kind of high heels on. And they're in the spotlight of the dance floor. All right, let's keep going. Mr. Mosquito bumped into some bed bugs. He gushed, "Mes petites, you've been missed." We went pillow shopping, they cooed without stopping. They all exchanged bug hugs and kissed. When suddenly, from off in the distance arose a great racket. Gasp! Louder and louder it grew. All the ladybugs shrieked, 50 fireflies freaked. A cricket collapsed and turned blue. How ghastly, how awful, how frightful, how horrid, cried moths as they peeked out the door. Then the ground, how it shook, no one else dared to look. All dreaded what might be in store. Speak up, someone save us, 6 beetles all bellowed. Speak up, sobbed cicadas off key. Mr. Mosquito, swift as a torpedo, said, please, I insist, allow me. He sped from the ballroom and ventured forth boldly. The night air was heavy with heat. He looked to his right, where the moonlight shone bright. He spied, egad, big feet. Onward and onward, yes, big feet kept coming. Tromp, tromping, crunch, crunching, oh my! Mr. Mosquito zoomed round incognito. He had to act quickly or die. He sent out a signal and summoned his kinfolk, his cousins and uncles and aunts. From swamp and from wood came mosquitoes that could. Some traveled from far away France. Mr. Mosquito instructed with passion. Prepare! Point antenna! Deploy! We swarm out tonight to drive Big Feet from sight. Are you ready? Get set. Go annoy! And now Mr. Mosquito and all the mosquitoes did what they're known for. So join me here. What do? Buzz. Keep going. Buzz. And what are they doing? They're attacking Mr. Bear, Mr. Big Feet. And off he goes, running away back into the woods. Mission accomplished, crowed Mr. Mosquito, adjusting his coattails and tie. He thanked all his kin. He heard music begin. He rejoined the ball by and by. Our party, you saved it, the locust cheered loudly. Our hero, Mosquito, hooray! 'Twas nothing, he said, his wings turning bright red. I like to annoy. It's like play. Mr. Mosquito was hoisted and carried. An army of ants raised him high. Termites saluted and dragonflies rooted. All hail him, sang one butterfly. Mr. Mosquito was led to her highness. Young man, she decreed, you're the best. For acting so gallant and sharing your talent, I dub you my royal pest. And here he is with his medal, his award. But wait a second. What's going on here? I thought we were at the bug ball, but our perspective has changed. We're not down in the grass and the weeds. It's like the camera has zoomed out, and now we see two children, two boys, sleeping in sleeping bags. Looks like they're in a tent. Looks like the tent is out in a woods. So what happened to the bug ball? Now, remember, I had asked you to look closely at the pictures as I read the story, knowing that there would be kind of this big surprise at the end. Did you catch any clues along the way? So let's look again at the big picture, and now let's look a little bit closer. And remember, we're going to go back to the beginning of the story. Remember when Mr. Mosquito was late to the ball and Horsefly and Gnat shoot him in? Well, he's entering, we thought the bug ball, but he's really entering the tent, the flaps of the tent. And he's going to stroll down a red carpet. Do you see the red carpet there? Well, what was the red carpet? As we zoom out here and we then look in, the red carpet is a red sock. All right, let's keep looking at some things. So there it is, the red sock. And what about when Mr. Mosquito, he strolled down the red carpet and he bowed to the queen bee on her throne with the royal family beside her? We see the throne, but when we look at it from this angle, what was the throne? Red carpet, red sock. The throne is a comic book, and there you can see that. Let's keep going. Remember the comb that the lice wanted to loan him, the green comb? Well, there really is a green comb there at the end of the sock, okay? And then, remember, this was one of my favorite illustrations. Mr. Mosquito is waltzing with the wasp, and I said there's the spotlight of the dance floor. They're in the spotlight. Well, what is it really? It turns out they're dancing in the beam of the flashlight. And there we go. And remember when Mr. Mosquito was thirsty and he went up to the bartender and said, "I need some chilled blood over ice to drink"? Well, we can tell there's some lettering there. And really, what was the bar? It was a granola bar up there by the beam of the flashlight. A granola bar. And remember when Mr. Mosquito bumps into the bed bugs? Now, I was putting clues in this story, but Ponder Gemble, the illustrator, she did some clever things too. And when I saw her illustration here, I said, "Oh, I love that pink polka dot wallpaper that's in the back of the picture here." But it's not pink polka dot wallpaper, is it? No. What it is the tissue box there in the background. Yes. And then there was this illustration, and I thought, I don't remember myself putting in a clue about some wood, but there are some insects, and then it dawned on me, those are termites. And what do termites do? They eat wood. So Ponder, on her own, did this clever little thing, and she had the termites standing on a piece of chewed up wood. And of course, that's right there in the illustration too. Up by the sock, there's a little chewed up piece of wood. All right, there, can you see that there? Zooming in. Now, let's hold here for a second, and let me suggest to you that when we read a story, we can read a story on one level and strictly enjoy it. We expect our stories to have a main character. In this story, it's Mr. Mosquito. In a story, for it to be interesting, there usually has to be a problem. In this case, the problem is there's a big bear coming to stomp on all the fun at the bug ball. And in a good story, we usually like our main character, Mr. Mosquito in this case, to solve the problem. And that's what he does. Mr. Mosquito gathers all his relatives, other mosquitoes, and he said, "We're going to go out and get rid of the big bear." And they do by flying out and biting him and annoying him. And the bear runs away. Problem solved. And Mr. Mosquito thus becomes the hero of the party. He saves the bug ball, and he saves the bugs. As readers, it's often nice, though, to go back and read a story a second or third time. And when we do that, then we often realize that sometimes there's another layer of meaning to a story, or there's more that we can get out of it just under the surface. And here we have a case where, as the camera zoomed back and we saw there was more going on, when our perspective was larger, we saw that the bug ball was taking place inside a tent where two boys were sound asleep. The tent is out in the woods, and a bear is approaching. Maybe the bear was drawn to the tent because it saw the beam of the flashlight, it saw light in the woods. Maybe the bear smelled food, smelled that granola bar. But for whatever reason, the bear is approaching the tent, and had the bear come in, the party would have been disrupted, the bug ball. But possibly, the boys would have been injured. So Mr. Mosquito, he's a hero for the insects, and he's a hero again because he likely saved the boys. A hero 2 times over. So, another point I would like to make in conclusion is that as writers and as readers, there are stories. We can create a story that's strictly factual, non-fiction, we call that. And maybe you've written a story before about your dog. It's all about your dog. Or you write a story about your grandma. That would be a non-fictional story. But maybe in other times you like to totally make up stories. This, of course, is a fictional story because we know mosquitoes do not wear tuxedos. They don't ride in limousines to a fancy ball. And all the other insects don't do the things that we saw in this story. So I totally used my imagination. But I did something beyond that, and writers often do that. As writers, we often also draw upon our life experiences, things we know to be real and true. And I would say to you, can real boys and girls sleep in sleeping bags? Of course. Can real boys and girls sleep in tents? Sure can. Can real boys and girls sleep in sleeping bags in tents out in the woods? Absolutely. And are there bears in the woods? We know that's the case too. And I can speak with some authority because you see these 4 boys there? These are my sons. Now, this photograph was from a number of years ago. But as a family, my sons slept in sleeping bags. They slept in tents. They slept out in the woods. And our family did a lot of hiking in national parks. And in those parks, we encountered bears. So, again, I drew upon life experience, what I know to be real and true. And at the same time, I used my imagination to create this silly story of mosquitoes in tuxedos. And I put that together to come up with Mr. Mosquito put on his tuxedo. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being good listeners. And I hope you'll continue to be good readers.